Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Mina here. You're the CEO of Tony Romas, which is a place that's been so iconic for such a long time, and you now have a really important role of making version 2.0 happen. Of coming up, you've helped come up with this new brand strategy, and you're figuring out how to now build it back up and just build it different, for a different type of consumer today. And I think it's such an important thing to focus on and to really help scale out. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me here.
Awesome. So how did your interest, wanting to be somebody who would lead a company like this and be a business leader, how did this passion of yours to go on this path in life, really start and originate for you?
I'm a lawyer by profession. So every choices I have made in my life, with the calling that I want to help others and I want to improve things for my clients, for everyone I work with. So when I started representing Tony Romas, I started in Tony Romas back in 2021 as the buy side lawyer for the investor who bought Tony Romas.
Mm.
And my scope of work was to do a legal review. However, I got very interested into the brand and I developed a lot of trust with the team, with the shareholder. They offered me to be an outside GC. I always made it clear that I'm a practicing attorney. I love practicing law. I still have my law firm. So, in order for me to work in Tony Romas in any capacity, I cannot give up my law firm. I am a great multitasker. I know how to keep my focus in whatever I am doing, but I would like to continue to practice law. And that was something agreeable by the stakeholders in the company, which is unusual and for something I'm extremely grateful for. And now I'm finding myself in a situation where I am running my firm, representing my clients, and also running Tony Romas. Tony Romas is a legendary brand for
Mhm.
53 years and it has a great history. It allowed people to create memories. And when I was tasked to turn this company around, I have this vision. It's about building a bridge between folks who are nostalgic about our brand and with Gen Zs and millennials. And that's where my core focus and vision is right now, to build that bridge.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a big mission that you've kind of taken on at this point.
Mhm.
Um, you've got a lot of interesting aspects of this, which I definitely want to unpack. One piece of that is this like tech forward franchise model. Can you just talk a little bit about that, mean, and like what that even means? What is a tech forward franchise model?
For we are at an inflection point right now. We
Mhm.
are seeing robotics, we're seeing AI, and it's getting to a point where I think it will be like the internet when the internet first came, where it's not a luxury, it's not an option to have internet, where internet is part of our life. And that's where I think all the industries are heading.
Mm.
Now, the question is about the pace we put ourselves, right? At what pace are we going to implement and incorporate some of these elements in terms of AI and robotics? So, when I think of a fast forward franchise model, my vision is for my franchise partners who become the operators of our brand. They're operating a brand where there is a optimized workforce model and where technology can help them with that, where there is inventory management, where it takes out a lot of work out of like guesswork and speculation, and we create a system that's sustainable for them.
Mhm. Interesting. Have you seen more people be willing to franchise because of this model that you have?
I'm seeing a lot of interest. I'm
Mhm.
seeing over the last couple months, there has been a skyrocketing interest in Tony Roma's understanding what we're trying to do, what type of support we're going to provide. But when there is a franchise or franchisee relationship, these could be some aspects of our offer. But what it always comes down to, and this is something I assure everyone, is the service rendering nature. Because as a franchisor, we need to keep up with the R&D, we need to do the testing, we need to do the marketing, and we need to support our franchise partners. And Tony Romas has done that globally. And I always say it's like a bespoke service. There is no one size fit all. Each market brings different type of challenges. There are different type of consumers. We need to work with our franchise partners. So no matter how tech forward we become,
Mm,
that personalized service, which we are known for which we have like franchisees that have been operating under a brand for over 40 years, that will just become better and stronger.
right. How does your background as a lawyer kind of come into play leading this brand here? Like, do you find it to be important? I mean, obviously they're two different things, but being in law, it's very analytical. You have to go over details. I mean, I'm sure when you're building 2.0 of this brand, there's a lot of minutia and fine tuning that you have to be focused on. How helpful has it been for you?
You actually touch that. It's that analytical skills.
Yeah.
I think that is my strongest asset over here. Like coming into a different industry and trying to what I say is like, get a 360-degree overview and see where we need to analyze. Okay, this area requires a different type of solution, and I like to think out of the box. And when you're turning around a company, that's extremely needed to be a little bit creative, innovative, and having that analytical skills. Because oftentimes what end up happening is when a system has been implemented and running for many years, it becomes rinse and repeat.
Hmm.
And I feel like rinse and repeat don't work anymore in this modern age. And that's where my analytical skills come in. And it's beyond legal. Whether it's operation, whether it's marketing, whether it's training, oftentimes I sit down with my team, I'm coming up with something where like, okay, that may actually work. And I do it in a way, I don't call my meetings like meetings, it's brainstorming session. There are problems, but I want to keep the feedback loop open where everyone in the company is comfortable and willing to share their feedback.
Hmm. Interesting. How do you balance the human touch aspect while making this as tech forward? I think it's a really interesting point to talk about because today we see people almost like panicking that AI is going to take their jobs and things like that. And obviously, you want to include AI. Everyone wants to include AI and figure out how to do it right. How do you do it right? How do you balance that while having the human touch and having the human elements, not getting rid of it, but also being automated as much as you can and being smart about that?
Mhm. So, one thing that everyone should remember, one of the biggest difference between AI and human beings are, among many other differences, human being can continuously learn. AI needs to be trained and retrained, right? So, even if AI is great, it can save some time for certain tasks. What human beings can do, that feedback loop, whether it's from our franchise partners, whether from our team members that we receive, and customize it and come up with a solution and give a solution to them that actually works, not one size fit all, because I'm actually not a proponent of a one size fit all approach. And franchisees often don't like that. And franchisors fall into that trap. Okay, we have built a model, it works, and we are just going to franchise this out. And that's where the human element comes in, trying to understand what they're going through, offering them compassion. If they're struggling with sourcing anything, finding alternative supplier. These are some of the things that will always be relevant, no matter what AI or robotics do. I will need AI and robotics to increase efficiencies, but as tools for human being, but not as a replacement.
Yeah, there's a balance. There's a
Mhm.
balance that has to be found, and I'm sure you just find it through testing. And
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. Because you learn and you relearn as a human being, but for AI, it needs to be trained. The language model always needs to be trained and retrained, right? But the learning aspect that we can do, AI
Mhm.
cannot do that yet.
Yeah. Hmm. So there's kind of like, I mean, there's so many restaurants in the world. People know what it takes to go from zero to a successful franchise model and scaling out, elsewhere. But there's been a lot of changes since this kind of playbook has been put out there. How are you looking at this now differently in terms of attracting people to Tony Roma's 2.0? And what are you kind of doing different? I mean, we talked about the tech forward aspects, but what are you kind of doing different to now bringing this maybe new generation in that wants to be a part of the business, because you're trying to cater towards Gen Z and the previous clientele.
For new franchisees, one of the biggest barriers to entry is cost, especially for legendary brands like ours, Tony Romas, right? So the analytical skills I have as a lawyer, I try to apply that and see where I can cut back some cost, yet maintain the brand standards, which will allow us to attract more franchise partners. Because there are some areas I think where some flexibility can help, obviously ensuring that the franchise partners that are coming into the system will be uphold the brand, quality and integrity, because they are the operators at the end of the day. In terms of improvement, I'm looking into cutting back in terms of the build out cost.
Mm.
One example is the square footage requirement. Back in the days, Tony Romas used to be in very big spaces from 6,000 to 10,000 square feet.
Wow.
Now we have brought it down to 3,000 square feet. If it's the right market, a 3,000 square feet will still work. But then the question is about location, because location is
Mhm.
everything for restaurants. So we need franchise partners who wants to develop in key locations with a high foot traffic. We have seen that Tony Romas does tremendously well when it is near, let's say inside a casino. Our location in Vegas is doing very well. There are people who are lining up for 2 hours to go
Wow.
in there and have a meal. And it's inside a casino. It attracts a huge foot traffic. Our location in Berlin and in Germany is doing very well. It's right next to the Mercedes-Benz Arena. So if we find franchise partners who are willing to develop in high foot traffic locations, we would also offer them flexibility in terms of square footage or anything that we can do that will allow them to keep their overhead, costs low and build some cash reserve at least when they're operating.
Mhm. How different is it Tony Roma's 3,000 square foot store versus 6,000? Like, are there any sacrifices you really have to do, or is it just less seating?
It's less seating. Because if you think about it, nowadays what we have in terms of ghost kitchen and the deliveries, all these other platforms through which you can generate revenue and serve consumers, it allows you to cast a wider net without having that very big seating capacity in house.
Mhm. Right. It's a different, bit of a different time now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, do you see yourself continuing to do law and in your own
Mhm.
practice as this scales? Because what you're putting in place, Mina, this can really scale a lot further, and
Mhm.
that's going to be demanding. Do you see both being possible?
Yeah, I think it is. It's about building a system that's sustainable and that can scale, right? In my firm, also, I have a very great system. A lot of
Mm.
it is technology dependent. I have great clients who love our services and great team members in my firm that work with me, from attorneys, affiliated partners, my law clerks, my paralegals. So I believe the law firm is actually going in a direction where eventually it can even run without being completely dependent on myself.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, those are the best ways to run company systems. It can't just be one person, one focal point. Everything revolves around.
That's the brand, right? For my law firm, the brand is me. People come to me for my expertise, for my success rate,
Mhm.
for my dedication. But my team members are being trained to carry out the work in the exact same fashion.
Mhm. That's awesome. How is the casual dining space like most evolved? I mean, it's been around for,
Mhm.
as long as I can remember, forever. It's been around for a long time. Does Gen Z look for a different type of dining experience than what other generations have looked for? How do you kind of cater towards both with that? And like, just how has the casual dining space changed since you guys were established?
It has changed tremendously. Back in the days, when you would go to a legendary brand, you would get a menu, like a booklet. Like, there would be so many items, even like our competitors like Applebee's, Red Lobster, ourselves, Tony Romas. There would be so many items, right? In my opinion, that doesn't work anymore. Gen Zs and millennials would rather look for few items, but that gives them an experience. They're looking
Mm.
for experience that is beyond food. And how do you do that? Like, we did look into metaverse and other ways to attract Gen Zs and millennials because building that experience is extremely important. It's just no longer just making a food and serving. It's
Yeah.
about how can we bring people to our restaurants, what can excite them, whether it's through the ambience or whether it's something that we offer.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of kind of interesting things you could tie in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Gen Z is it's pretty different, I think, in what they want in a lot of areas, and they've kind of been less brand like only in love with a certain brand and
Yeah,
only really owe them. They've been less brand like I don't know, dependent is the right word. Like they're open to trying new things. So
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. My older one is a Gen Z. She's in high school, so I get a lot of insights from her. It's actually fascinating to see how open-minded they are. In fact, I appreciate to a certain extent. They like to try out new things.
So when you think about like making the brand more adaptable, there's a lot of ways to do that. You talked about earlier, like the franchise model
Mhm,
and how you're making it. There's less square footage. Um, I mean, do you see this like becoming something where people can fall in love with the brand and
mhm.
then even be much younger with way less experience and start to franchise it? I mean, there's a lot of now Gen Z wants to be entrepreneurial. They want to do their own things. Have you kind of thought about how to maybe bring them into the brand in other ways? Like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. What we offer in terms of the Tony Roma's ribs, it's unique.
Mhm.
In my opinion, it's still unmatched. The Tony Roma sauce, the flavor profile. It's unfortunate when the Gen Zs were growing up, our geographical footprint location started to decrease.
Mhm.
But wherever we still have some units left, I do encourage young people to go try it out. And the way to bring them into the brand, not only as consumers, as you were saying, like there are a lot of Gen Zs and millennials who are very entrepreneurial,
Yeah.
also into the franchise ownership. And the other thing that I really like is I would like to invite ideas in terms of this whole Tony Romas 2.0, what type of experience the consumers in this particular group would like. And there's so many things that we can do, right? A brand is no longer just about serving food or selling a product. It's also about our ethos and what we are doing, what we stand for, and connecting with them on that level as well.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, there's so many brand turnarounds kind of happening right now. I mean, one of them also, I'm sure you're aware of with Red Lobster and what's
Mhm,
going on there. And you kind of touched on something interesting before that I think there's some similarities, which is like the reduction in how the menu's done. There's
mhm,
maybe too many options, and
mhm,
you don't necessarily need as many options for different generations that you're catering towards.
mhm.
Um, I mean, is there even like a playbook now for a turnaround today? That's even out there, and I mean, is there even something like that that exists? Because we're seeing different types of turnarounds all around, currently.
Maybe you just gave me an idea to create that playbook for all the brands, because what we are seeing, it's an evolving situation. It's a very evolving situation with all the legendary brands, what they're going through. Some are even going through bankruptcy, but they're reemerging from bankruptcy and they're restructuring it. These brands are all Tony Roma's and the competitor brands that have been struggling to get consumers in. I think with a little change in menu innovation and
Mhm,
the design layout, we can bring consumers back.
mhm,
Obviously, we have more competition. People like new types of food. Back when we had our heydays, there were not that many options. But
mhm,
now there are so many options, and it's the culinary creativity I think that have been missing. If we can struck a fine balance in terms of maintaining the core values of the brand and
mhm.
injecting those culinary creativity, I think there is a possibility that we may be able to overcome all the challenges that we have been facing, and there may be a lot of successful turnarounds.
Yeah, I mean, now's the time to do it. There's less like we have to go with this brand, more we want to try something new. You mentioned food experience. Like what made you guys say this is the time we really want to bring Tony Roma's back and build it up much further? Like why choose right now to really invest in this and make it happen?
So back in 21, the company was sold to a new investor. So when the new investor came in with a lot of ideas, basically they wanted the brand to be bigger, and how to be bigger. I always use this example of Apple. There was a time in the 90s when Apple was struggling,
Right.
and what they did, they out innovated, right? And I read somewhere where it's, the vision was that we're not going to focus what our competitors are doing. We're not going to focus what the current demand is. We're going to go all into innovation and then come back bigger and stronger, and which is what happened. While it's not the same industry, the tech industry is different and it's easy to scale. It's the food industry. But the idea is great in terms of like, not only like saving the brand is enough, but having that elements of innovation, working on the R&D, working on where you can improve the menu. I always tell my team, like, a booklet menu is not going to work. We still have booklet menus in
Mm,
some of the existing units. But for the upcoming ones, it has to be streamlined. Why offer so many items and drive up the food cost? Sometimes the increasing cost forces you to innovate, the
mm,
changing landscape. And that's where we are right now, right?
mhm.
The supply chain challenges, high food costs, the recent elephant in the room is tariff. So all these, I always reject any type of doom and gloom type landscape. I don't know whether I'm overly optimistic. I think the challenges force you to innovate. And again, that principle is right now being applied to Tony Roma's.
Yes, that is a great way to look at things. The
Mhm.
challenges force you to innovate. I love that. What does the roadmap look like right now? Short term goals, long term goals. What's the immediate kind of goals you want to hit at this point, and what's the big picture vision?
So the immediate goals are to expand our footprint in the United States. We would like to sell more franchises, and especially in areas with high foot traffic, Times Square, casinos. We have been doing very well in casinos in Vegas. And we have another sister concept called Tony Roma's Bones and Burgers, which is a QSR. Perhaps expand Tony Roma's QSR to movie theaters,
Mm,
airport, colleges, and it's a low or build out cost. And at the same time, we are a global brand. So we are selling franchises globally as well. We have a great presence in Asia Pacific, and I would like to expand in Asia Pacific, in the Middle East, and Europe.
yeah, it's great that you're building on a foundation that's so trusted and
Mhm.
there's a very much something that people can gravitate towards. They know will work well, and I mean with the things you're implementing, and you already have these case studies all around the world. I would think you could just keep going on that,
Mhm.
and go much further.
Exactly. And that's the advantage of being a 53-year-old brand that have operated in so many different markets. Like, we learn from our own experience and try to improve that. So there we are privy to all these data, and then past experience and accounts,
Mm,
which is why I think Tony Romas has a humongous advantage by being in so many different markets. Sometimes consumers judge us by the decreasing unit count, but as a someone who wants to be a franchisee of the brand, they should look into the whole 53-year-old history and the experience we have and the challenges we have overcome.
mm. Yeah, they definitely should. Well, that was all the questions that I had, Mina. I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I think it's something really interesting that you're up to here, and you could be building an incredible case study through this transformation right now that's happening. And I'm excited to just see this, continue to come to life and scale further. And wish you much success while you do it.
Thank you so much, Ben. Appreciate it.